Hello and welcome to the York Festival of Ideas. My name is Dawn Hadley. I am Professor of Medieval Archaeology at the University of York and I am going to be the chair this evening. And it's my great pleasure to welcome you all here to the Yorkshire Museum. Well, it's my great pleasure to introduce our speaker this evening, Martin Carver. Martin is Emeritus Professor of Archaeology at the University of York. And in his time as a professional archaeologist since 1974, he's excavated and researched in a wide range of regions: England, Scotland, Ireland, France, Italy, Sicily, and Algeria. He directed research at Sutton Hoo from 1983 to 2005 and founded the Sutton Hoo Society in 1984. Martin is now trustee of the Sutton Hoo Ships Company, which is working to reconstruct what was discovered as a ghostly outline of the ship in 1939. And we're delighted that Martin is joining us today for an update on the ship's progress. Martin, over to you.
Thank you. Thank you all very much for coming. It's lovely to see so many people coming to give our ship the push it needs. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take you down to Sutton Hoo first of all and just catch you up with where it's got to in 2026, because the work's still been going on the site. And then we'll move to the ship and talk about why we are building it, talking about how we're building it, and then what we think we'll get out of it in the end. And then I'll throw it open to you to give me a hard time. And this is a project which is a community project. We have 2 shipwrights, we have a project manager and 170 volunteers, each of whom is being trained in various parts of the organisation of a company that's formed in order to reconstruct this ship. So we're a partnership between shipbuilders, people who know how to build a ship in wood, clinker built, and archaeologists who are experimental archaeologists and are using the reconstruction to learn something about the past. And these 2 groups don't meet very often, or didn't, but we've tried to bring everybody together and make them cooperate with each other. And you can imagine how it can be that you can know a lot about how a ship should be, and you know a lot about how this particular ship was, and these don't match. And so we are all the time, as you will see, we're all the time making special deals with each other about what we can really do in order to reconstruct the ship well. So first of all, let's go to the site anyway. First, has that worked? Yes. So the Sutton Hoo site's been explored since 1938, and there have been a number of campaigns of excavation and research there. By the time we get to today, we can report that there are 3 different cemeteries at Sutton Hoo. So although everybody knows about Mound 1 and the treasure, and it's where the ship was, of course, there is actually 3 different communities that develop on the banks of the Deben at this place. First group are the Anglo-Saxon incomers who come up the river and settle, and they are burying with cremations in urns and also with inhumations. And then that gradually gets more and more high status until at a certain moment a new cemetery is made where it says leaders here, 7th century, and that new cemetery is all high status. So it's the King's Cemetery. And then the 3rd group of people are people who have objected to the Christian rulers that came after the pagan rulers who are buried there, and they have been executed. And so the rebels here, they are an execution cemetery. Did I go back or forward? Okay. So here's the Royal Burial Ground, and we have excavated over the years about just over half the mounds that are visible, and a similar number are now still there. So the general approach to this cemetery has been to learn as much as you can by digging as little as you can. And so we haven't got everything, but we've got quite a lot. Some of the key mounds are mentioned on this little slide here. The ship burial, the one which King Radwald is supposed to have been buried in around about 625, that's mound 1. And then we've got a horse and rider burial, which is about 600. There's a second ship burial, which people don't discuss because it was really smashed into 1,000 pieces and just scattered as iron nails. And then 2 others are quite interesting. The practice of cremation starts right at the beginning of this cemetery, just as it goes on to the end of the previous one, Cemetery 1. And then, sorry, this other burial at the bottom, where it says Redwell's Queen, question mark, which is dated about 650, that's the only female grave we've found, the only woman, and it was also the latest. So she is imaginatively decided to be the dowager and the queen of King Redwald. So Mound 1 is famous for its treasures. There's a drawing of it by Victor Ambrose, and it contains a lot of gold. You can see this in the British Museum, of course. It's a very glittery burial, very, very rich, but it also has certain styles and a particular imagery which has led people to say it's not just a wealthy person, but it's a person with, let's say, ambitions to be seen as a leader, such as the helmet and the scepter. So these things are iconic, and therefore that people feel more and more confident in saying that Mound 1 contained a ruler of some kind, and Redwald is the one whose date of death fits the art historical dates of the objects in the burial. Now, just to get a bit more background, this is a time when the incomers to Britain, but from both the east and west, from the west they were coming from Ireland, from the east they were coming from the north of Europe, they're coming from North Germany, Denmark, Norway, that they were coming in and they were settled and they were beginning to form themselves into kingdoms. So we have a number of kingdoms you see on the left-hand side. A lot of these survive in the names of counties, the names of the regions of Britain now. So it has lasted quite well. And just to rub in the point about how well these kingdoms and the identities that they project have survived, on the right-hand side is the famous map done by Peter and Ione Opie, who went round recording children's games, just in the years before television made it impossible for those games to survive. But not just the games, the songs and the local dialects and so on. So as you see, there is a similarity between these two things. The same areas that were pronounced kingships or kingdoms in the 7th century have still survived in the children's games in the 20th. More background. So these are the early medieval migrations that came from Norway and Scandinavia and Germany and so on in the 5th, 6th century. But by the 7th century, the English are going the other way. So the dotted line shows how people came out of East Anglia and made their way to Rome and ultimately to Byzantium. So this quite new research shows that the warriors at Sutton Hoo were themselves acting as mercenaries and joining the Byzantine army and coming back with Byzantine bath buckets and special jackets like that, which were worn by the soldiers of the Byzantine army. Now, at this same moment, we're still in the early 7th century, and this is really important for the ship. At this same moment, there was an upsurge in craft activity in the south and east of England, and in fact, East Anglia, and to some extent Sussex, and to some extent even as far north as Northumbria, you see the signs of very advanced carpentry. So it's a time when there is a lot of experiment with clothing. There's a lot of very interesting jewellery, metalwork, which is what Sutton Hoo contains, like the Staffordshire hoard and so on. But at the same time, there is a lot of experiment with woodwork. Now, wood doesn't survive very well, but thanks to some pretty classy excavations, they've been able to tell that they built big halls, certainly as wide as this room, which are built of oak, and they have mortise and tenon joins. They have ways of keeping, they have crook buildings. A lot of the techniques that will be very common in the Middle Ages were all started at that time. So here you see what it's like in the 6th century, the little village, experimental village of Westow, and what it's like in the 7th century, a very much more sophisticated structure. That sort of sophistication is what you need in order to build the Sutton Hoo ship. And over on the left-hand side is the chap wearing the so-called warrior jacket, the person cavalry jacket, sign that they'd been, or knew somebody who'd been fighting for Byzantium. So, first of all, we've got to look and see what was left in order to reconstruct this ship. So this is our starting point here, and you can hopefully make out, yes. Can you see a spot there? Okay, these are the rows of iron rivets here along the side of the ship. And they're beautifully spaced and very nicely placed in position so that all the rows are aligned with each other. That means that you can see how many planks there were, because these iron rivets are joining planks together to make a clinker-built hull. So by looking at the rows of rivets, you know that there's going to be 9 strakes from the keel upwards. On the left-hand side there, you can see a rivet. There's Madeleine holding a rivet. So it's got 2 bits to it, a nail and a rove. And then there is other kinds of evidence, top right. Do you see a little thorn shape there? That's the pattern of a wooden thole, a wooden, it's like a rollock, which you pull the oar against. And the fact that there were these things along the sides of the top of the gunwale means that this was primarily a rowing ship, of which more in a minute. So the question is, which people were always asking, is why are you doing this? It's going to take a lot of effort to make this reconstruction, and even then we're not quite sure, we were not quite sure originally what we were going to do with it. And so you have to have a reasonable answer to undertake such a thing. And you can't just say, well, for fun, anyway, it'll be great to see it, and so on. You've got to have a better reason than that. So I start with the premise that Mound 1 burial was a very, very important burial and had lots of artifacts in them. All these artifacts have been reconstructed. The ones you see in the British Museum, they've all been reconstructed. They're all in a chamber that collapsed underneath a mound. They've all been reconstructed. So this is the helmet, for example, That was retrieved in the, like this, bits, lots of sort of iron sherds for the helmet. And they had to try and restore it. So they used two techniques. One was the jigsaw puzzle technique, where you tried to join the bits together, and the other was the comparative technique, where you looked at other helmets. And they did that, and they came up with this one, was the first effort, with the one with the mad staring eyes here. That's a helmet which resembles a sort of First World War German coal scuttle helmet. So they were using comparisons, but perhaps not the right one in that case. And then the 1971 version here, that's the one that that Bruce Mitford did, and that's the one that sort of stuck as the image. Notice that it looks rather like a 1960s biker's helmet, so they had their influences as well. But anyway, there are other kinds of helmets which make it quite likely that this is a pretty good fit. So we're going to look for a pretty good fit. You don't get what you haven't got, but you can get to what you want by what you have got. So I just want to engage you now with this principle. I think it's terribly important to realize that the build of this ship, the reconstruction of this ship, has principles. It has been thought through. First point, we're not constructing any old ship, which would be easy. You could just make up what it looked like. We're constructing the ship that was buried at Sutton Hoo in Mile Run. And then we know that there's quite a lot of it missing. So as I showed you, we know where the planks are. We also know where the frames are, which you'll see in a minute. We know where the rowers, the rowlocks were. We know the rivets helped to guide us and so on. So we know a certain amount about it, which is actually not that bad because it gives you the whole three-dimensional volume of the ship. So you're better off than you are, say, with a wreck in the sea, where everything's scattered all over the place. Although the wood's gone, you've got the shape. So what we do know then is the dimensions of the hull, the clinker build. We know that they used oak because the little oak patterns survived on the rivets, and that could be detected as coming from oak. They used wrought iron rivets, and we had plans that were made in two-dimensional plans, made in 1939. And then 1975, these were looked at again and made that much more certain. And then we did a digital plan, or Southampton University did a digital plan. So we know quite a lot to start with. However, there's an awful lot missing. Partly known is the length of the stem and stern posts. So these bits that stick up, probably stuck up above the ground. We don't know how far because they were missing. That bit of the mound was missing. We don't exactly know the depth of the keel. We don't know the number of oars. We don't know the length of the oars. We don't know the steering gear. But you can argue these from early examples and boat building essentials. Again, it's that partnership between the boat builders and the researchers. We know that the oars must be long enough to reach the water. The keel must be hefty enough so that you can beach this enormous boat without breaking it. That's the partly known. Then you get to the barely known ornament, figureheads, benches, decks, number of crew. And that's hard. You can argue it to a certain extent, as I'll show you in a second, from earlier ships. And you're allowed to argue it from later ships, Viking ships. The thing about the Viking ships are that they are very similar to this ship, and therefore some of this ship probably remains inside the Viking ships, which are very much better preserved. So if I can persuade you of the logic of that, it doesn't sound logical, but it is actually quite logical that because boat building is a pretty traditional business, that they will have developed things that already were around. So Sutton Hoo sits all on its own, and the nearest ship like it in the past is 300 years earlier, and the latest ship is 300 years later. So then the unknown, sails and the rigging. So we can maybe get something from the trials which will tell us whether it's possible to sail this boat at all. And I think it probably is going to be possible, because you can sail virtually any boat as long as you have the wind behind you. It's only when you start to tack that things get a bit tricky. Okay, so these are some of the things that before Sutton Hoo could inspire our builders. Skinned boats, hardly at all. Log boats, not very much. But the new dam ship, about 320 CE, so that's came up. Oak ship, clinker built, came out of a bog, almost intact, had its steering gear intact and so on. So we learnt a lot from that ship, and we've copied a lot of things from it. Meanwhile, well, that happened in the Baltic area, and in the Channel area and inland on the continent, which was part of the Roman Empire, we have these Roman ships. Famously, the cargo vessel found in Blackfriars of the 2nd century, and then a patrol vessel here of the 4th century. Now, these are quite well known. So we're not completely alone. We're not making it all up. We have quite a lot of interesting pointers. And here are the later ships. And you can see immediately how similar they are to the Sutton Hoo ship. Kvalsund 780 and the Oseberg ship with a beautiful ship, clinker built, so on. So aspects of the Sutton Hoo ship survive in those that came after. That's the premise. So the question of whether it sailed or not is still open, and everybody works in the Longshed. I don't say they've all got yachts, but they're pretty well all sailors. So they want to put a sail on our boat as soon as they possibly can. And I'm the one who's advising caution. This is an example of an Oseberg reconstruction, which was sailing in front of the wind. That was all right. And then we tried to see whether it can tack. Now, the Viking ships reckon that it's very important to learn how to tack, because it's the only way you can get off an inshore wind which is blowing you onto the rocks. So without that, then most of the Viking ships would have a lot of difficulty getting out of their fjords and then off to Britain to raid a monastery. So this, as you see, had a rather unhappy ending, because the ship capsized and it sank. And we all sank with it, except we didn't sink totally, otherwise I wouldn't be here. But they had a, well, it was quite an adventure. And I'll elaborate if you wish me to, but I realise I must be brisk. So we'll move straight on and look at where we're building the reconstruction. So this is the Woodbridge waterfront. The big white building is a tide mill, if you know that area. And then the green spot is on the Longshed, and that's where the ship is, and that's where it's being built by our 10 trustees, 2 shipwrights, 1 project manager, 170 volunteers. The question of design, then, rests in what you know, what you half know, what you hardly know, and what isn't known at all. And you've got, as for your feed-in, a plan, a 2-dimensional plan, and then earlier ships, a digital model, and so on. And here's the shipwright trying to gather all this together in his head and come up with a design which is going to produce the same beautiful rhythmic shape as these ships have, these clinker-built ships have. So we start with gathering the oak. So as you probably noticed at the beginning, looking at the ship in the beginning, the thing about these is that they bend in several directions. So because it's pointed at each end, all the planks have to bend out and bend in again. They're not just one plank, they're sets of planks, they're strakes, but they all have to go like that. Also, they go from the gunwale, which is at midships, down here, to the stem post up there. So they also have to bend in this direction. Also, they have to bend in another direction, because when they're joined to the bottom of the keel, they come out horizontally. But when they go into the stem post, they're vertical. So they somehow, you have to bend them out, bend them round, and then bend them together so that they fit in the end. So it's quite difficult to describe, but luckily we have a shipwright who thinks in 3 dimensions, and he never has any problem imagining how these planks go. And as you'll see, we do have a device, which I'm not sure is Anglo-Saxon, but it's quite a good device to help put the planks in position. Anyway, the upshot is then that it's no good going and cutting down straight oak trees, because there's only one straight piece of timber in this whole ship, and that is the central part of the keel. Everything else has a bend in it, and what you really want is a bend in the tree gives you the strength to have a bendy plank. And so we spend a lot of time looking for this kind of thing. Wibble, 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 like that. And then we've got other things to make, like frames. We'll come to that. Anyway, this is some logs arriving. I'll say a bit more about the oak in just a second. These are logs arriving here at the Longshed, and then you put them on a thing like this, and then you...
One more.
At that point, you can get a nasty shock, because these trees, a lot of these trees have diseases inside. You can't see it from the outside. Weevils are particularly active, and also different kinds of fungi. You can see the brown here. You see the one on the left there? That was in one of the timbers of the keel, or in the backbone, I should say, of the ship. And we had to decide what to do about it. The fact is that you could see through the fungus there and out the other side. So basically it would leak. And there was a big discussion, can we get the epoxy resin out, you know, and just put a bit on, who's going to know, you know, something. And anyway, I was chair then, and I held a meeting under the cameras of Time Team, and we discussed the pros and cons. And there was a very helpful surveyor, yacht surveyor there, who said, yes, you can easily repair it, but you'll always know it's there. And that was the clincher for me. And I said, we're going to have to get another log and try again. It took us 6 weeks. It cost a lot of extra money, but it's worth it, because now there's a piece of timber in there we can be completely confident about. So you may wonder about these trees. The oaks of England are a very precious resource. We didn't want to go abroad for oaks. We wanted it to be native oaks, but we wanted to replace all the oaks that we use. So we probably, we've planted 20 acorns for every tree felled. So we've now got an enormous field, the Saxon ship wood it's called, with lots of little oaks growing side by side. So we're about 20 times as many oaks as we've used. I think it's important to say that, because we actually got a lot of stick right to start with. Various things in the newspaper saying things like, famous oaks felled to build toy ship, things like that. You know. So we wanted to make sure we were on the right side of conservation. Also had to make the tools. The tools have been found in various hoards and also in Flixprosite, different kinds of axes you see here, which the most interesting one is that, at the bottom right-hand corner. And here you see somebody using it, trimming the plank. And beneath that, you can see the same kind of axe being used to make boats in William Conqueror's fleet in 1066. Long tradition. So the keel is not a keel, it's a backbone. It's got 5 parts to it, straight keel at the bottom, stern post and a stem post, and then to join the two, underlouts. So as you can see here, stem underlout, stern underlout. It's completely impossible to find a timber that shape in a wood. So it was quite clear right from the beginning that it would have to be pieces, and those are the pieces that we chose, and in the end, I think they worked pretty well. At the bottom, you see them not being notched. When the tree comes in, you notch it like that. Then you trim it until you've got something vaguely rectangular, and then that makes you the keel. So the ship itself, 88 feet long, 27.1 meters, and the keel is 12 inches, 1 foot deep. Everything's mainly done in feet and inches, simply because it gets a bit nearer to the Anglo-Saxon measure. Not that we know exactly what that was, but we know it's pretty close to feet and inches. So here we are shaping the main keel. It's upside down. So if you look at the thing at the right-hand side, but just use my screen here, this is what you have to design. Okay, so this is the top of the keel is curved like that. So it like have 2 wings, and underneath, through the wings, you put an iron bolt, and then you put the head of the wing, the bolt down there, and you put the rove at the top there, and you put a plank in between. So the plank is joined to the underside of the keel. The keel themselves, the bits, are joined not with iron, they're joined with wood. So these are tree nails, if you like, which are, in this case, made of oak. They have a little wedge banged into the bottom. And then if you see the drawing on the left-hand side there, that drawing down here, there it is, going through, and you can see it splaying out there. And then you wait for a bit, and then you saw that off. So wood fastens wood, and therefore they all expand and contract at the same rate. So here's the building beginning, and here is our secret weapon, the molds. These black things are made of plywood, and the position of each of these black things is worked out by the shipwright taking a 2-dimensional plan and making it into a 3-dimensional plan. So you've got this 3-dimension, and these molds are what remembers it. So on the side of each mold, there's a place for where the plank goes. And here on the side here, this side, you can see all the planks have come up practically to the top. Molds are still there. They'll soon be removed, but they're still there at the moment. And here's a plank being trimmed. Plank after plank after plank after plank. We've been doing it for 4 years now. So in order to make the planks watertight, you need to put something, some luting, something between the 2 planks, which are going to be tied together with a rivet. And here's the wool-making team, and they are going to soak the wool in pine tar, beeswax, linseed oil, and animal fat. Delicious smell. Quite sticky as well. So here's an underside. Sorry, I must choose my spot. Here it is. This is the underside of a frame being covered in loot, and that frame is going to sit on the bottom of the boat, and they're going to have frames all the way up. You see just a tick. And this one is doing the same thing, but to the edge of a plank, and that's so plank against plank makes a watertight seal. So on the this side here, you can see a bit of cloth sticking out, and there is the rivets going through. These are the iron rivets here, and this is how they're put in. So first of all, you drill a hole through the 2 planks, then you bang a nail in, then you put a rove, that's this square thing with a hole in the middle, put that over the tip of the nail, and then you bang in. Well, first of all, you get somebody with good stomach muscles to man the door, to man the dolly. That's the dolly. That's the dolly there. You man the dolly because you're going to whack it this end, and you don't want him falling over and grunting. So you've got to get that rove as tight as you can possibly get, and then you snip it off. And once you snip it off, you go back to the dolly, make sure it's absolutely tight, and then use a peening hammer. That's a peening hammer there, to just bend over that so the thing is completely sealed. You can't go backwards. Once you've got it sealed, that's it. It's not like a screw. And here they are, wisely, I think, as the planks get bigger and bigger, they're really difficult to move. So we created these Anglo-Saxon clamps, you see here. They're just very ingenious, just bang the wedge in. That plank's being held in position there. And only when it's exactly in position can you start putting the holes through and putting your rivets in. I think they make a nice pattern. This is the outside of the ship. Rows of, this is the head of the nail. And as you can see here, you need more than 1 plank. You need about 5 planks, in fact, to make a continuous run. And these runs, they're the strakes. So there are 9 strakes. There's only 5 here, and there's going to be another 4 added on top. And then also inside, you get a nice pattern. See it here. This is the rove side. So these roves are square, and they have their points aligned with the keel. So they're all aligned. It's one of the interesting things about this ship is that an awful lot of careful artistry is introduced in it. It's not just that they love the timber and polish it up and do all those things. It's that everything has to be perfect. And it isn't that surprising. When you look at the jewellery at Sutton Hoo, everything is perfect. So one lot of artisans are going to be quite critical of another if they don't do it as well as it can possibly be done. Right, this is fitting the frames. So here is the picture of the frames as seen on site. And then there were just crusty lumps of crusty sand. So you go to the woods and you come back with a sort of Y shape if it's right at the end. If it's not right at the end, then you have a curvy bit known as the floor, and then you have an upper curve known as the futtock here. So there's 3 bits to the frame. So all the time you're trying to confront the problem of having perfectly curved, strong, perfectly curved timbers which don't grow like that. So you do have to have joins. So then we will be ornamenting. So I'm now getting to the point of showing what the future is going to look like. This is very important. Now, why are we doing it? Because the Vikings did it. The Vikings did it because we did it, we think. So we're going to do it anyway. And we're using the artwork of Sutton Hoo, as you see here, and Book of Durrow, and these are Sutton Hoo things here. This is Oseberg with its animals going all the way up like that. You can't see this very well, but these animals which run along the side of the stem and the side of the stern, where they end is where the water should be. So the ship is perfectly in trim when the water is just at the end of the two lots of animals. Okay. So here we are rowing, CGI. If you go to our website, saxonship.org, you'll see it rowing. People see it rowing and they think, how do they manage to keep in such perfect time? Well, exactly, they're digital. We're going to go down our river, into the sea, and back to Ipswich Docks, to Leamington, and then to the River Stour, which is probably the best place to start teaching 36 people to row in time. Now, I don't know whether you've ever been, well, you've probably been for a picnic with your family and tried to get them to row in time, and we never succeeded in doing that. But you can see it's a bit hard with 36 people. Also, the oars are different lengths, and the rowers are different heights above the water. So we've got an awful lot to learn to make this look good and to get some movement. However, the decision has definitely been made that the rowing and the rowing trials will precede any attempts at sailing. Now, this here is the sort of big ambition. Once we've done our training and we know we can handle this boat in different waters and different weathers, then it would be nice to get the boat onto rivers where Anglo-Saxons have towns and have settlements. If you go on a Viking trial, there's 8 of you, you leave port, you see the sea, and then you arrive at another port. But I think that it's more communal, more better for a community project to have everybody having a chance to row, particularly all the rowing clubs in the different rivers, and then we stop at an Anglo-Saxon place. Somebody tells us all about it, we have a party, and people shower us with money. So that's the idea. And here's our shipwright doing some rowing, just in case you... And this is a very happy setup in the Longshed. On this over here that's Jack Barnard, she's the project manager, teaching a young rower. We get lots of school visits. We have numberless visitors. I think we have sometimes 1,000 a week come and come to us. And then at the bottom there, you can see Laurie Walker, the shipwright, with all the production crew. So this is my last slide, and I just wanted to leave it up there while I'm winding up. It's very important to have a project which has a plan and which can see in advance where that plan might lead to new knowledge. If it's a community project, which we are, not only have we got to lead to new knowledge, but we've got to lead to benefits to the community. So what this mind map does is show you where the reconstructed ship leads to on the research side, leads to on the public engagement side, and then the trials do the same, but going the other way. So it looks a bit complicated, but it isn't really complicated. There's just these 2 big goals to fulfill. We want to find out about what this ship was used for. We want to find out where it went, where it's likely to have gone. We want to find out why it was so huge compared with all the ships that had gone before and all the ships that came after, right until the time you get the Sea Stallion in 1042. So it's quite a big ask, but so far it's been successful. In other words, building the ship means handling oak. Oak is quite difficult to handle. We know the tools that they used, we know the material they used, and by doing it, you learn how they did it. So that is where the future of the project lies. Publication is going to be, there'll be technical publication, of course, but in the meantime, we're doing a few books to keep going. A book about the design, a book about the build, and a book about the trials as well, or we reported there. So very nice for you to come, and thank you very much.
Again, because we're on camera. What? Should we sit down again? Because we're on camera.
Oh, you want me here?
Yes, please.
Okay.
Right, thank you, Martin. What a wonderful talk, and really captured the sense of adventure there and how embedded that project is within the community. We do have some time for questions, and in order that we are going to be able to hear them, we need to wait for our runners with the microphones. And I saw a hand go up on the third row there, so our runner on the left, please, or my left.
That was really interesting. My main interest is in the woodwork, but my question is about the keeping in time of 36 rowers. Is there any evidence for the presence of musicians or, at the minimum, a drummer, in the same way a marching band relies on a drummer to keep in time?
The only evidence I know is that there's an Anglo-Saxon word for a ship iron, and that's supposed to be the thing you beat in order to keep the rowers in time. So we don't know what that looks like, except that it has to make a clanging noise, so we can probably come up with that. And then it's a question of working out how to keep the keep all the oars in time, because as I say, all the lengths are different and so on, so it's going to be quite. So whether you have 2 or 3, I don't know what you do, but the word is there in the dictionary. Bosworth and Toller have it. It must be true.
Excellent, thank you. There's a question at the back, if the microphone. Or actually, I'll take 2 questions at the back since we have the mic up there. Yeah.
Oh, these people.
Thank you. This is a bit out of left field, really, but in 1066, we understand that William of Normandy caused several hundred ships to be built during 1066 after Harold of England took the crown. Do you think that's viable? Bearing in mind what you know about building a ship.
Were built for William the Conqueror.
How many?
Yeah.
I think you said
several hundred.
Yeah.
The invasion fleet was several hundred ships.
Yes, and the flagship La Mora was also under construction in Honfleur. Unfortunately, they went bankrupt, so it never got finished. But interestingly enough, there are very good clues in the Bayeux Tapestry on how ships were handled in those days. So remember that this is particularly about the sailing. You know, the sailing problem is that if you haven't got the wind behind you, then you have to tack. Now imagine 300 ships going across the channel and trying to tack. So what you did, and the historical evidence actually bears this out, is you wait for a good wind. And the pictures of the ships in the I'm glad you asked this question. The picture in the Bayeux Tapestry, the ships have these kind of strange triangular sails, and they end in a rope, and the rope is being held by the person who's also holding the tiller. So that's not a tacking thing at all. What that is a way of letting it out in case there's a sudden draft, a sudden blow, sudden gust. See what I mean? So I think it
Is it viable to have built that many ships in such a short time?
Yeah, I think
or was
so. Yeah, they started, I can't remember the exact date they started, but they started with almost as soon as Harold had decided to be king, they started building. And the tapestry actually does tell this story. And you had teams all up and down the rivers. It wasn't only that thing you see in the tapestry. They're doing it up and down the river. There's plenty of people building ships, but whatever else they're doing, they've got to stop. And William says, okay, we're going to focus on this because the next step is we're going to go and get Britain.
Thank you. I think is there another question at the back? Yeah,
yes,
the mic's there.
I would love to know whose idea, because you said it's a community project, I would love to know whose idea and what pub you were sitting in when someone suggested, let's try and rebuild the Sutton Hoo ship, it can't be that hard. And if I can slip in a sort of second tertiary question, it would be, I know you haven't finished yet, so this might be a bit unfair, but how long do you think it took them to build the ship? Because obviously it will take you much longer, but your best estimate for how long it took them to build such a fantastic ship?
Well, yes. They would have put experienced boat builders in position. We had people who'd never built anything, but they were, except for the shipwrights, there's just the 2 shipwrights. Otherwise, you know. So just to go back to the beginning of that rather interesting question. So basically, Angela Evans, who wrote up the ship for the British Museum, and then I both had the idea that it would be good to reconstruct the ship because everything else was being reconstructed by the British Museum, as I said. So we decided it would be a good idea to do that. So we started making inroads into, well, first of all, we tried to get a Heritage Lottery grant and were turned down for that. The National Trust took over the site. National Trust set up a committee to reconstruct the ship from round one. And that got, shall I say, a sort of slow start. And then while it was having its very slow start, a group of yachtsmen got together on the other side of the river, and because the main ship yacht builders, Wistocks, had gone bankrupt, so there was a place to build something. There was a big argument going on in Woodbridge Town Council about what should we do with this, and this group lobbied and lobbied and lobbied. They said, we must have something here that's permanent, and we must have something that's iconic. And so we'd like to build a ship, we'd like to build the Sutton Hoo ship here in this shed. So they got that already, and then so we had two ships on the go. One being built on one side of the river and the other being thought about on the other side. So I just went over and talked to them and said, we've got some ideas about this too. And we started the conversation of it's got to be not just boat builders, but researchers. It's got to be not just archaeologists, but boat builders. In other words, it has to have parity. You have to have a parity. You have to have a real partnership. And I can't say it's been that easy, but it has more or less happened. We are, of course, researchers are heavily outnumbered by the community's recruits because they are all local and they're from Suffolk. They know Suffolk, they know the rivers and so on. But I don't want to exaggerate it one way or the other. I think it's been a success. It'll be very much more difficult next year after the launch because we'll have 170 people with no job because the ship is going to sail off or row off. And it's not the same people that wield the axes that row the boat. So I've said at length because I think it was a very good question. I think it is very difficult to join up the bits of any community project. But this one has an output which everybody can see, and then it starts again as a different project, probably with different funding, to do the trials. That's what happened, I think.
Thank you. There's a question over on the right there. That was the first.
How long it takes? Oh, how long it takes? Well, it took us a long time because we had to train everybody. We had to make the tools, and we had to start from scratch. And also we made mistakes, and also we got pieces of timber that had weevils in. You know, we had to do all these things. Now, if you were King William, I don't think you'd go to a special discussion group. I think what you'd probably do is say, well, okay, execute the shipwright, and let's start with somebody else who doesn't make weevils. And you know, I mean, they were a bit tougher than us. I think we were inclined to say we like everyone to be happy here if we can, if we can, and still get the job done. So I honestly couldn't say, but I believe it was something like a month or 2 months that they spent building these ships. But they knew what they were doing. We didn't. We had to find out what we were doing.
Thank you. There's a question over there.
I understood from what you said that this ship was much bigger than other ships that were around at the time. Are you sure that it actually sailed, or may it have just been built as a funereal ship, and when you try and sail it, you're going to find that they didn't address all the problems you'd need for a real ship that's going to float?
I didn't catch all that. So,
do we know that the ship was actually built to be sailed as opposed just for the...
No, very good question, yes. We know that the ship wasn't built to be sailed, and the reason for that is that, well, first of all, there was no rigging, but you can say, okay, but they wouldn't bury it with the rigging. They wouldn't bury it with the mast. So those are like arguments which don't really have much force. However, what you can't argue away is the shape of the hull. And to a certain extent, the depth of the keel. We didn't know the complete depth of the keel, but we know it wasn't that depth deep because it wasn't that wide. So I think that we had to say, and this is what the Norwegians particularly argued, and the Danes actually, they argued that with a ship which got a profile like that, and a little stub at the bottom, no keel, and you put a sail on it, and it'll just turn over. It's also quicker for rowers to row in that shape, but if you're sailing, you want a sharp water cutter, and you want it to have a depth there, so that otherwise you get just blown to leeward. You know, just you can't really go anywhere that you want to go.
But I think part of the question was whether it was actually intended to go out on the water as opposed to just being made for
Oh, sorry, I didn't hear everything. It's definitely made to sail. It's definitely made to go on the water. It had a large patch in the hull, which had been repaired. That was a good sign that it was a real working ship.
Do we have one final question? The lady at the front there.
Thank you, very interesting talk. Have you given the ship a name, and is there evidence that they were named?
Well, it's funny you should ask that. I tried to, when I was chairman, I tried to get them to give a nail. Oh, sorry, not a nail. Freudian slip. No, what they wanted to do was to monetize the name. Now, I'm sure you're familiar with this idea. What you do is you have a kind of crowdfunding idea. You ask everybody what they think, and then you make a choice. So thus, the Sir David Attenborough was voted boat-face by an outstanding majority. So it's not something I wanted to do. I went to the Anglo-Saxon people in Cambridge and said, give me a name of a ship. And the students there gave me about 4 or 5 names. They were all fine. I said, you've got to be able to pronounce it, and we've got to be able to put it on the boat. But then nobody wanted that. So this was where the two sides definitely parted. The community project wanted to monetize it, and they wanted it to be seen to be a community decision. However, of course, the community is quite a narrow community compared with the whole of Europe, who probably had a say. So they've done that. It's gone out. We've had 3,800 replies, and they're going to sort them out. Now, I don't know what that entails, because I haven't been asked. They don't want me there, because I might suggest an Anglo-Saxon name. So I think it's going to be very interesting to see what the name is. But the name is only going to be vouchsafed to the person, hopefully a royal person, who will swing the bottle and launch the ship, just as they do it.
Thank you. What a wonderful final question. Well, thank you.